I'm Simon Shuster. I've been covering Ukraine and Russia for about 15 years, roughly 10 of those years for Time magazine. And that's just been my focus pretty much my entire career.
I'm Karl Vick, an editor-at-large at Time, which I joined in 2010 in order to run the Jerusalem bureau for Time. So I was there for 4 years and been covering the Middle East.
I think the similarities in the two wars are all fairly superficial. I think what they have in common is the imagery that people see on their screens observing these wars, but historically, in terms of the nature of the conflict, the goals of the belligerents, I don't see that they have much in common.
What they have in common is U.S. involvement.
Mm-hmm.
President Biden being involved in wanting to arm one side in both conflicts, and in his Oval Office speech, I think he linked them by saying each was an attack on a democracy.
Hamas and Putin represent different threats, but they share this in common. They both want to completely annihilate a neighboring democracy, completely annihilate it.
The U.S. has, in the last few generations, become basically the primary ally and sponsor of Israel. It's got at the State Department level, and every administration maintains something guaranteeing military superiority for the Israeli military. It's called qualitative military edge, I think. They get our best. They're the first country that gets our best weapons, most advanced fighters. Intelligence cooperation is almost hand in glove.
Ukraine would like to be in a similar position vis-a-vis the United States. I mean, already I think the United States, its level of support, its role in supporting Ukraine is decisive. One line that stands out in my most recent interview with President Zelensky is he was describing a meeting with U.S. senators where they asked him, if we don't give you the aid, if we don't give you the money, what happens? And he said, what happens is we will lose. So that just gives you an idea of how decisive the role of U.S. support. The president himself said this, in a closed-door setting, but then he recalled it, in a public setting with me in our interview. I've talked to a lot of people in President Zelensky's circle and in the military leadership in Ukraine who, and this is before the October 7th terrorist attacks and the beginning of this latest war, they aspire to become a partner to the United States and to the Europeans like Israel. They talked often about the Israeli model of development.
As I say, the country is really shaken, it feels like, there was a poll done by Tel Aviv University in the last weeks of October, and they asked people, do you think the level of force that the Israeli military is using in Gaza is too little, the right amount, too much? I don't know. 58% of Jewish Israelis said they're not using enough force in Gaza. Wow. So the whole world is watching this war through the footage of what's happening in Gaza and all the many dead, 10,000 dead now. Israelis are, one, they really believe that they have to reestablish their defense doctrine, which is deterrence, which is if you hit us, you'll be hit so hard it won't occur to you to hit us again, or anyone else to hit us again. But they also do not see this conflict through the way the rest of the world sees it. The effect of the October 7th massacre was so profound to a Jewish population that has the strongest military in the region and one of the strongest in the world. But they don't see themselves that way. They see themselves as vulnerable Jews who spent 2,000 years without a home, being chased from country to country and victims of pogroms and things like the Holocaust. So all of that uncertainty and insecurity got reawakened and made fresh by the Hamas attack and the atrocities that Hamas carried out. And that, I talked with therapists who were dealing with survivors, and these are left-wing, empathetic people who generally would like, she said, I always try to save some thoughts for the Palestinians and what they're experiencing, and they just don't have it this time. And it's not that they're angry and it's revenge. They're just, their capacity for empathy is totally exhausted, totally full. They cannot lift their gaze from what's happened in their country to what's going on in Gaza.
At about 20 months into the full-scale invasion, when the entire country is effectively a war zone, susceptible to Russian missile strikes and mass attacks, no one felt safe in those 20 months. And I think one thing that stood out to me this time was people felt tired. It's a long time to be at war. And I should say, you know, the desire, the resilience to achieve victory is still overwhelming. This is clear in opinion polls where the vast majority of Ukrainians say they will not countenance any peace negotiations with Russia that even consider territorial concessions, giving away land to the Russians in exchange for peace. Ukrainians are not ready to even consider that, according to the opinion polls, and according to my conversations too. But still, the fatigue shows. The economy is in terrible shape, as you can imagine, a country where, you know, there are no civilian flights. The only way to travel around the country is by train or by car, because the airspace is full of fighter jets, missiles, and anti-aircraft fire. People wanted victory. They were determined to kind of keep fighting and making sacrifices for the sake of victory. But the fatigue was just, you know, was there. People had to start at some point thinking about themselves, their families, their savings, their kind of material well-being, the future. You know, I think a lot of people who left had to make a decision, who left at the beginning of the invasion had to make a decision, am I going to come back and try to help my country, or will I stay abroad and try to build a future for myself? They also depend on the news, and President Zelensky is very wise to this, that if there isn't some success that the authorities, the military can point to, the mood within society slowly kind of goes toward fatigue, depression, sadness. Whereas if he can demonstrate some victory, even if it's not a strategic breakthrough, but some victory on the battlefield, that he can point to and say, look, we're winning, we're kicking their butts, we're kicking them out, that helps. That helps lift up the spirits of society. That's been consistent throughout the invasion. It's just, it feels like it's been a long time since a major victory has raised the spirits of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian leadership.